So, and welcome everybody to another episode of The Sims 4 Bustin' Out, where I take builds from The Sims Busting Out and I remake them in The Sims 4. I know, unfortunately, that we missed a recording of doing the Goth Manor with everything that happened with my old computer going into my husband's computer. So, I'm here doing another build. This one is actually Studio 8, which was just an art studio that you could go to after a certain point in the game as well. This is where my memory is foggy on how the game actually started running just because it's been so long. But good news, I actually found my copy of The Sims Busting Out, and I still have my PlayStation 2. So we're going to take the time to replay that game at some point so I can get a familiarity with it again. But like I said, regardless, this is the Studio 8. My knowledge of it is that it was nothing more than an art studio that you could live in and that you were helping the owners of this place rebuild it, kind of. For me, it was a little bit of a challenge. I didn't want to necessarily make Studio 8 like another residential home. I wanted to actually make this a art gallery, I think, or an art center here in The Sims 4. So I took my time to try to figure that out. I didn't know what packs I wanted to use. Originally, I was going to use the Get Together pack along with base game, but ultimately I settled on City Living because of the art gallery-ish vibe you get off of the stuff that comes with that, like the decorations. So ultimately, that was my end goal here. Another issue I ran into during this build was trying to figure out what I was going to do with all these rooms, because the two rooms that we have in the back left corner in Sims Busting Out were bedrooms. That big area on the upper right hand corner, that is a kitchen in The Sims Bustin' Out. So it took me a minute to really decide how I wanted to do this. These were both bathrooms in the original game, so I made them bathrooms again. Now here, I wasn't just going to leave them with toilets and sinks in them like you usually see on community lots, just because it just didn't seem right for such big rooms to be only that. Now, being that you can have murals and woodworking stuff, easels, all that in a art center, I figured, well, why not add showers and lockers for people that are going to be changing clothes, because you got paint all over yourself. Of course you want to change clothes or something along those lines. So ultimately I did those back two rooms as like an art room and then a musical area, and then I did this big area like it was in The Sims Busting Out as an actual gallery. So I went ahead and added some different pictures in there. This room, I believe, where I put the bar, I believe that was originally just a living area. So I decided to make it a bar area where they can order drinks. I put, later on you'll see I put other tables there and whatnot as well. This was actually kind of a fun challenge. So while I had already gotten all of the requirements, I was like, well, it's kind of empty still. So what do I do with all this extra space? So I put up those, like I said, those murals that you can paint on, one right in the front there on the wall, and then I put two windows there so it kind of shows to the outside world, and then I had one on the floor, and then I still just, it was kind of a struggle, like I said, to figure out what I wanted to do with that entryway and all of that. Ultimately though, I had a lot of fun with this. I don't really remember, like I said, I don't remember much about Studio 8. My memory starts to fade after, you know, going to Dudley's trailer or Mimi's house, and I barely remember the Goth Manor. Here you see me putting down these floor lights to kind of illuminate the paintings, and then I realized that looks way too cluttered, so I went ahead and deleted them all. Ultimately what I did is I did overhead lamps, and I decided here where the floor mural was to leave the concrete. Figured that would be a good idea for people that are actually doing a floor mural, and then the rest of it's just wooden flooring. Is it necessarily a good idea? I don't know. I wouldn't really know much about doing floor murals in an actual gallery, but I figured this is kind of a creative way to do it. It also takes up that space without necessarily needing to put a bunch of clutter stuff in there. Ultimately I did the same thing with the wall mural. I used the concrete wall. Took me a minute to find wall paint that I liked for this, using only base game and City Living, because City Living's more on the apartment side of it. It doesn't really think much about the actual venue part of it. So it took me a minute with that. Next I went ahead and I looked at the requirements again, and I decided, well, I would like some music on this lot, so I put some music into the gallery portion. I didn't put it anywhere else in the gallery. I don't know why. Probably just my mind slipping as I'm trying to figure out what to do with all this space. Here you see me trying to work on this bar a little bit, and I was looking for those bar backs that you see, like that came with Island Living, the Horse Ranch, all that, but nothing actually came with City Living or Base Game. Took me a minute to kind of figure that out. Maybe there is, I don't know. If you guys know of one, please put down in the comments where there is one. Ultimately what I did is I just kind of made my own. I fiddled around with it for a little bit. I tried to make something work here. I ultimately decided I didn't like this because it didn't fit too perfectly. So then I was like, well, I'll just squish it together here, and then I'll put the random order board there, which was a little too big, so I decided to shrink it down and put it in. Ultimately, this didn't stay. I mean, I did still do that as a bar back, but I didn't take the time to place it all together like that. I went back outside and decided, well, I need something like a sign outside. The only thing that really came with it was that until I went into the debug menu. Then I realized, looking at my picture that I had on my iPad, that there was this back portion that like led to different statues. And it was kind of weird. It looked like this, but I wanted to add to it, so because we don't have that many statues to really use in base game and City Living, so shrank it down a little bit, used the statues that I could find, including the suit of armor, and then I just left it like that for now. I also added that bubbler because, yeah, well, you know, City Living has those. These fountains are more of placeholders than anything. Originally I was like, that would be nice, and then looking at it I was like, that's really cluttered, maybe not. But I decided I'd go back to that later and come back to the inside here to finish up this bar area, which this also took me a minute to figure out because I didn't know how I wanted to do this. Once again, big open space, not sure what to do with it. I tried using alt placing to replace everything, wasn't ultimately happy, so I was like, okay, I'll just scoot everything over, resize up this bar. I'm not going to take the time to alt place the things again to make it look all nice and together. So I then looked at like, oh, maybe I can add like a little coffee station, and then I realized that doesn't come with City Living at all, or base game. I'm guessing that's a get-together thing. So I was like, oh, well, we'll just put a piano in here, you know, something to make it seem like a bar, if you will, but not necessarily a bar. I don't know. I thought it was nice to put the piano in there. Next, I went ahead and lit the whole area because I realized I hadn't put any lights anywhere yet. Then I came back to this entryway, which, I mean, I'm still personally not satisfied with it. I added a bunch of different pictures and whatnot in here because, I mean, I needed something, and then I realized these things can work well in the art room. Then I came back over here, looked around again, trying to find things to add it to make it feel complete. Couldn't figure anything out, decided to add a path up to the front door. And then I just kind of struggled with it. It was something I didn't know what I wanted to do. It took me a minute to figure out maybe I could put a rug in here like a runner. If you size it up, it's too big. All of them were like that. And then I found the rug like this, and it fits perfectly in there. And it's something that changes every palette, if you will. What's the word? Regardless, every palette is swatch. Every swatch is something different. I like the fish one. Don't ask me why, I just did. Figured while I was going ahead and having a piano in here, I might as well make it kind of blues themed in here. So I added the portraits of the blues players, the piano, put centerpieces on every table. Ultimately, I was really happy with how this bar area turned out. Then I went ahead and refloored the rest of the build, put in some type of wallpaper somewhere. I couldn't think of anything that really worked or made sense to me. That's when I realized that the hallway in these rooms, while they have stuff in them, they seem really bland. So I kind of sat here thinking, what can I do? What can I add? What can make this look somewhat decent? Ultimately, I ended up going ahead and adding a bunch of pictures to the hallway after I redid the bathroom here. I wanted to find things that worked, but like I said, whenever it came to like wallpapers and whatnot, there's not that many in City Living. So I went ahead then and I found different things to put in the hallway here. I was thinking maybe plants, but a lot of the wall plants that I have are CC, and I didn't want to put any CC in this build because I want to put it up on the gallery, which it is for you guys. It is up on the gallery under Studio 8. You just have to look for Moo Mallow to go ahead and find it. But ultimately, I feel like some places I over-decorated, but at the same time, thinking about it, I was like, well, it's an art gallery. Obviously, it's going to have art, pictures, things everywhere, things that might not make sense for the build. Once again, I was looking for plants or something to put up, and then I remembered, oh, I only have custom content wall hanging plants whenever it comes to just city living and base game. So looking around again, trying to find stuff to put in these rooms to make them feel a little bit more complete. These ones, I don't know why they were the biggest struggle for me, but ultimately I was happy with how they turned out. Not like terribly happy, but there was something. I wanted to put something in here too. I know planter box doesn't necessarily make the most sense. Added a mirror to the big bathroom, little bathroom as well, and added a picture in there. Then I came back over to this bar area because I found a picture I wanted to replace that with. Looking around, this is where I was like, what do I put in this big room? Originally I was going to make it an actual kitchen area, but then I thought, oh, art galleries, they also have sculpture rooms, and we do have quite a few different sculptures. Most of them are for tabletop, so I figured I'll put a bunch of tabletops in here, and then I'll add sculptures to them and see how I like it. So I pretty much put a tabletop in every corner that I could think of, and then I just started stacking stuff on these corners. Found different things that I could go ahead and take some tables out, like I found that plant, sized up some things to put down. I put down the train cars. I thought they were cool. What build is complete without a Baby Yoda in there? So I figured why not put that in there as well. Ultimately, I was really happy with how the sculpture room turned out. I got rid of the pig and added the antique typewriter there. Did the same thing as I did in the other room. I put lights above everything too, just to make it feel like we're trying to present these items to make them presentable. For a second, I thought about putting the floor lamp under the pearls. I think those are supposed to be pearls, but then I was like, that's not okay. We'll not do that. Added the lot traits to make this a nice art gallery-ish lot. And then I went ahead and decided I need to go ahead and do some landscaping since I officially decided I know how to do that. It took me a minute to figure out how I wanted to do it because I didn't want to necessarily overclutter it, but at the same time I wanted to make it feel full, if you will. That's the best word I can think of. Also added a grill to the back so people could actually grill and make food. Here's where you see me going into the debug menu so I can go ahead and get some of these debug plants. Not necessarily because I wanted to keep the lot cheap, because once again, it is just a venue lot. There's nothing residential about it. You don't have to worry about purchasing this lot. But sometimes the plants that you find in debug are just so much better. So I went ahead and pulled those and started going ahead and doing this. I think, thinking back on this, it took me a solid 2 hours to fully landscape this how I wanted it to look. And I mean, you can kind of see that reflected in how long is remaining on this video. There's still roughly about 6 minutes left of the video, and that's just all me experimenting around with all these different plants, trying to figure out how I wanted to landscape this. What can I do to make this look nice? Because I didn't want to fully block off that window either, since obviously it was going to be looking into the mural that people would be painting. So I'm trying to find very low laying plants to put here without repeating things too often. Which that in itself was also a struggle. So I shrank down a lot of things and just layered them in here to make it feel somewhat nice. And I was ultimately happy with that side. So then I went over to the other side, did the same thing, put that wall plant there and started layering stuff in, trying to make it look just like a nice little garden area. These front portions weren't that bad to do. They were pretty easy in the grand scheme of things, just, you know, shrinking stuff down, finding different things, layering it, making it look nice. Where I really began to struggle was whenever I went to the back portion of this. I also wanted to go ahead and give the path a little bit of depth by putting some dark terrain paint around it. Yeah, but coming back here and deciding to do this, that in itself was a huge struggle. Not necessarily because it was a lot. I mean, if I'm using everything from game, it's not that hard using the debug menu at all. But I was only using, once again, city living and base game, so I'm repeating a lot of plants, and I didn't necessarily like that, so I was trying to find a way to repeat everything without it becoming redundant, repetitive. It was definitely a challenge, I'll give it that. I could have used rocks more in this. For some reason, I didn't think to use the rocks that often, and that's probably my own fault, me trying to find a way to make this all seem nice and green. This is where you'll also see me decide that I can do something else instead of have a crap ton of fountains in the back. I did find that fountain. I debated using it for a very hot second, but ultimately decided against it. Once again, like I said, just layering different plants, looking, seeing if I can find stuff so I'm not repeating stuff. Essentially, you're just going to see me building up and down, up and down. That's where I deleted the first one, and then I was like, well, what can I put in here to make this feel nice? Some of the stuff, when I shrank it down, it left weird shadows, so I'm hoping the lighting I put in there kind of helps with those shadows. Well, once again, just putting different plants, layering things in to make it seem like a nice little garden area. Little paths leading up to these statues that we have out here, these sculptures. And then you'll see me, once again, looking at another fountain here. I'm trying to figure out also, or was trying to figure out, I should say, how can I put stuff in that's not going to necessarily stack on top of these statues, or on these fountains. I did ultimately decide to put trees in. I figured those would be nice little accents. And I have a lamp there. I was thinking about it at first, decided against it, but I mean, you'll see by the end of this that ultimately I did put the lamps in as well. Now I'm here with the fountain because I wanted to get this out of the way because I knew it was going to be my biggest struggle, was trying to find a way to plant the area without seeming like I'm interfering with the fountain at all. Ultimately, I did figure it out finally. It took me a minute, but I went ahead and just layered in the low-lying plants and then started building up to the bigger bushes in the back. Then I moved back over to the tree areas, and that's where I put in all the different bigger bushes, things like that. This was actually really fun to do. Ever since I've learned how to I don't want to say learned. Since I decided I had the patience to learn how to properly layer things, to put things in, I do like landscaping a lot more. Kind of sucks for how long it can take, especially if you're only using 1 or 2 packs, because you're just, like I said, you're just reusing the same stuff over and over, and you're trying to find a way to layer it all without it necessarily looking like a repetitive thing. But ultimately, I was going to go the whole way around. I was thinking of using the terrain paint to come the whole way around and just garden in this whole back area. But I was starting to run out of patience, if you will. I didn't know if I could go ahead and do that without necessarily feeling like I've just done too much. If you really want to see a lot of landscaping, you should take a look at the Goth Manor that I have up on the gallery. I pretty much landscaped that whole entire backyard. Then I found these nice little trellises in the debug, and I was like, oh, those would be nice to put in as paths up to each statue too. Refilled in some of those areas, put in a little bit more bushes, tried to fill in the back where I had those empty-ish spots looking. And then ultimately, I really just fell in love with how this all turned out. It's a nice little back area, garden area. Was going to do something further back there, but decided against it. Then I was like, well, I really want a sign up here on this front part. So you'll see me scrolling through trying to find one of those signs. Ultimately, I think I went back into the debug menu because I remembered seeing something that would be good for it. I would just have to raise it up because it's not anything that snaps to a wall. You'll see me also mess around with a few other things. Here, I actually had to leave my game and go and remove the camera states because I didn't realize I still had camera states on. It's something simple, but I liked it, and then I found that and replaced the sign as well. Added a couple more things to the front, checked through the lighting to see how the lighting looked. Looked okay at night, but I wanted to go ahead and still light up this back portion, so I went ahead and put these lamps in the back as well. And ultimately, I'm really happy with how this all turned out. If you guys really want to see this, like I said, it's on the gallery under Moo Mallow Plays. Thanks for watching.